I'm going to step you through all different parts you're going to need to install your Carter WO carburetor. Starting at the very top of the board, we have two 3/8-inch nuts. These are 24 fine thread. We also have two 3/8 lock washers. Then moving to the right, we have our carburetor gasket with diffuser. This is designed specifically for your Carter WO carburetor. We also have to install our accelerator spring return clip onto the studs on our exhaust manifold, where my finger points, and it'll be on this stud towards the right. Before the gasket is installed onto the manifold, we'll have to use some acetone just to clean the surface up so it makes a good seal. We're also going to run a dye onto these two studs just to make sure the threads are good. The first step is to get your 3/8-inch 24 fine thread dye, and we will now rethread these studs, just making sure that we have a good thread on these studs. And we'll have to just stick some paper towel into our manifold so we don't get any metal shavings into our manifold. Just stuff it in there. And now we can get our dye and just thread it onto these studs. With both studs on our manifold now rethreaded, we can now pull out our paper towel, being careful not to get any shavings into our manifold. The next step is to use some acetone to clean up the surface where the gasket will be seating on the manifold. Now it is time to install a carburetor gasket with diffuser. You want to make sure this diffuser is pointing downwards into your manifold. And actually, there is no sealant used in this gasket. See these brass bushings? This is what makes the seal around your studs. Now with the gasket and your diffuser pointing downward into your manifold, just slide it on to the two studs. It's just push on nicely, and that is how you install the gasket. With the carburetor gasket installed, we can now install the Carter WO carburetor onto the gasket. We'll just slide it right onto these studs, but make sure you have your carburetor orientated in the right direction. You want to make sure you have the opening valves where your cables will go into your carburetor. These want to be pointing towards the engine, and where your float will be pointing towards your fender, and we'll have to slide it right onto the studs onto the manifold, just sliding it on. I had to take you guys into a different angle so you actually can see this stud where my finger points. It's actually very hard to get this nut on. I'll show you a trick how to get this nut onto this stud. I will now show you why it's hard to put the nut onto the stud pointing forward, as it actually gets stuck and pushes against your carburetor where my finger points. But first you want to put on your lock washer onto that front stud, kind of lift the carburetor up a little bit so there's more room, kind of drop it on there. And now for the nut, I'll show you why this doesn't fit. See, it kind of pushes against your carburetor. So you have to lift up your carburetor a little bit to allow room for your nut to slide on. And then kind of while you're dropping it down, you want to thread that nut on. It's kind of tricky, but it will go. Thread the nut until it just catches onto the stud, because we still have to install the nut on the other side towards the rear of the vehicle. I've now taken you to the other side of the carburetor so you can see that stud where that nut will now thread in. First, you want to install the accelerator spring return clip onto that stud, just sliding it on. Next, you want to put on your lock washer, and then finally thread on your nut. The final step is to use a 9/16" wrench to tighten down your carburetor to the manifold, and you want to tighten them together. So start on one side and work back and forth so it puts even pressure down onto the gasket with those nuts. And the way it seals is you have to make sure that that bushing that I showed you gets compressed, and that will actually make the seal around your two studs, and it'll be a good seal for your carburetor. Now use your wrench to tighten these nuts down. One note when tightening the right side, make sure you get your accelerator spring return clip 90 degrees with the manifold, or pointing straight out from your carburetor, just holding it straight, and we'll just continue to tighten this. With the two nuts now snug, you want to go a quarter to a half turn more just to ensure the bushing on the gasket fully compresses and it's a good seal on the studs and on the manifold. And that is how you install your Carter WO carburetor onto your L134 Go Devil engine. Watch part 2 to learn how to install your fuel line that goes from your carburetor all the way to your fuel pump. And then watch part 3 on how to get your choke and throttle cable attached to the Carter carburetor. Thanks for watching and subscribe.